days ago have been translated into strong grid positions. But how will they fare during the race? Warm-up may give us a clue, so let's join John Watson and Ben Edwards to see what they can find out. Ben, of the top 6 last year, 4 went for one-stop strategies. Is that going to be favourite again?
Probably, Matt, yes. One Stop is the favourite here. But interestingly, of those 4, they were not Ferraris. Barrichello and Michael Schumacher both went for two-stop strategies. So it is possible. It can still be a rapid way of getting around this Monza track in the race itself. So we might get some idea from the relative pace of cars this morning. What was interesting to me as well yesterday was that BMW announced after qualifying that they've broken their magic 19,000 revs mark. They were revving up to 19,050 revs a minute during qualifying, and John, that really is pretty impressive.
Well, when you consider a 3-litre engine V10 revving to 19,000 RPM, well, that is, I have to say, awe-inspiring. And well, no wonder Peter was lyrical on the pit wall, trying to give us some idea of what it does actually sound like standing at Monza. What makes it so special is you get to hear engines running, not just fractionally, but for such a long run from the exit of Parabolica all the way down to that first chicane. It is a wonderful place. A beautiful morning here at the Autodromo. 21 degrees on the track, 16 ambient, 79% humidity. That's very high. As we just watched Jenson Button, who had a very disappointing qualifying session yesterday, make his way down pit lane, and hopefully it'll be a better race for Jenson, who's coming to the end of his 2-year service for Benetton stroke Renault, and next year looking forward to something from Honda and a competitive BAR chassis.
Out comes Michael Schumacher then, and the Tifosi will be gathered here today to support their man. He might not have taken pole, but he will be a major threat for the race victory. And as you say, here at Monza, September morning, it's Monza, there's that crispness in the air, but it's going to be wonderfully hot later on. The morning warm-up at Monza has something extra special about it. That noise through the trees, that little bit of morning mist, it's absolutely beautiful.
I mean, it's almost, well, I have to say it, poetic. Let's not get carried away with all the other arts. But I mean, the light shining through the trees, the whole atmosphere, and the September morning, it builds up, temperature builds up to the midday, then maybe 2 o'clock, we'll see temperatures in the low 20s. The perfect setting, the perfect backdrop, the stage for a Grand Prix. Of course, with the Drivers' World Championship and the Manufacturers' World Championship gone to Ferrari and Michael Schumacher, there's not so much to fight for in terms of world titles, but a lot to fight for down the field. And of course, BMW with Williams trying to consolidate their second place, as McLaren would like to challenge it, but McLaren not particularly competitive in qualifying. But do not discount McLaren come the Grand Prix. But there will be a battle in the front 4, then the second group of 4 cars, that's the 2 Jaguars and the 2 McLarens. That's going to be worth a watch. And don't forget Jacques Villeneuve, Mika Salo, Jarno Trulli and Giancarlo Fisichella. They're going to be in a battle royal as well for the top 10 spots.
Well, as you say, those McLarens starting down in 6th and 7th. It would have been 5th and 7th, but Raikkonen having his fastest time taken away after the incident with Takuma Sato. We're watching Rubens Barrichello leap from spare car to race car. But going back to that incident yesterday, let's have some reaction now from Ron Dennis, who's speaking to Nick Damon.
Ron Dennis, your reaction to the steward's decision regarding Kimi losing his best time for the incident with Takuma Sato?
It's harsh, but there's no point in taking the matter any further. We just concentrate on beating cars on the circuit.
Do you feel now, having analysed it, really was just a bit of a missed call because you didn't realise the Bridgestones were able to run 3 laps towards the end at speed?
They can't, and they weren't. I mean, that's the whole basis of the data. There's the car was going slower and slower, not faster and faster, and there wasn't another Bridgestone runner in the pit lane that's even contemplating that sort of strategy. 2 time laps is an option, but of course then you're fighting the weight of the fuel at the time when the tyres are starting to degrade. But I don't particularly wish to apportion blame, but the 2 drivers aren't the only people that were involved in that accident. And I mean, that's what it was. It was an accident. There was several circumstances leading to it. That's what accidents are. And to try and focus on one individual and blame him for what was basically the responsibility of the 2 teams and the 2 drivers, a little harsh.
On a more positive note, are you happy with the race consistency of the tyre today?
No, I think we're going to be quite strong, especially if the ambient temperature's high. But of course, there's going to be some mobile chicanes out there. Hopefully they won't be our own cars. I think we should be quite competitive in the race.
Ron, thank you very much.
So Ron's still smarting a little bit from the incident. It brings up an interesting question, John, in that, of course, the teams do communicate an awful lot of information to the drivers during a session like that, and indeed during the race. But at the end of the day, the driver is the guy in control of the car, isn't he?
Yes, he is. But I think that Ron is slightly gilding the lily, I think, and being obviously defensive of Kimi and saying it wasn't his fault, that there's many more people involved. And I would go along with his argument to much more degree if that incident had occurred on the final corner of the lap, but it happened before the end of the first time sector, when Kimi Raikkonen had only gone down the pit straight through the first chicane, hadn't even reached the second chicane, and he was aware there was another car. Whether he was coming in or not isn't irrelevant. He was on an out lap, and he should have been more cautious, and to take the calculated risk that Sato would be slowing down or would not force the issue, which he was entitled to do, because no one says you can only do 2 time laps and you must stop. That's the choice the driver makes. They made a miscalculation, they gambled and they lost, and unfortunately it has cost Kimi Raikkonen a position on the grid. Well, that's the price the team has to pay, and Ron is the first person to stand up and say we win as a team and we lose as a team. In this situation they lost, and I think they've taken the medicine. It's not nice medicine, they've taken it, and they're not going to make any further issue of it.
Well, we're riding here with Mika Salo, the Toyota, and he was a little disappointed, even though he qualified 10th, which is a good slot for Mika throughout this season. He's had a few 10th places on the grid, but he reckoned that there was perhaps even more available from the car, and reckons the car actually feels better with a heavier fuel load than it did in qualifying, so perhaps looking for more in the race this afternoon.
So here's the run, final chicane. And often on a Sunday morning, a car with that heavier load of fuel, you think, why did it not handle like this when we went into qualifying? Why is it when you do a series of laps and you get that little build-up? And this is where the difference, I think, stands between the great drivers and the rest. The great drivers have got that capacity to go out and do those blinding one-lap runs, as we saw Montoya do, or we saw Michael Schumacher, in fact, do it after 2 laps because of the character of the Bridgestone tyre. There's Montoya exiting out of the second Lesmo, and his confidence must be absolutely sky high. He looked so happy having completed the double. I think he's the first driver in history since Juan Manuel Fangio to, well, I think go back to 54-55 to achieve poles and wins. We assume he's going to win here this afternoon.
That's quite an assumption.
That is a big assumption, Ben. Thank you. It is a big assumption, because please never ever factor out what Ferrari or Bridgestone are capable of doing. And I would have thought, come all the running that we've seen over 2 days and the consistency that we've seen from Ferrari, that ultimately they are still the race favourites. But Juan Pablo Montoya and Ralf Schumacher are going to make it a tough afternoon for Ferrari.
Yes, that's absolutely true. He goes fastest for the moment. Williams don't often show much in the morning warm-up, and I wonder to see how many laps they'll be doing. We've heard in the past that BMW sometimes restrict the number of laps that they do in this morning half-an-hour session to protect the engines.
Yes, and Michael, just going on a brand new set of sticker tyres. You can see the labels on that set of tyres as we've got a car just waiting to exit the pit lane to do a launch start. And looking at David Coulthard. David has been out, he's done a run, he's come back in. Back out he goes, that installation lap, which pretty much everybody does. And currently we're looking on our screen, the timing screen, that's button 5 on your handset. It's this man, Ralf Schumacher, who's just set the fastest sector time for Williams. So slightly different approach to this morning's warm-up than others we've seen from Williams, because Montoya currently quickest, Ralf now quickest in first and second sectors by 1.8 of a second. So look to see somewhere probably in the region of 125, high 125, a low 126 from Ralf Schumacher, who of course is going to start on the second row of the grid directly behind his teammate Montoya.
Yes, in fact it's his best ever qualifying performance here at Monza, but for a while it did look as though he might take pole position yesterday. Held it for a while during the session. He goes fastest on a 126.536. So indeed the 2 Williams drivers looking quick at the moment. Montoya, interestingly, not as quick at the same time on track. It might imply perhaps there's a bit more fuel on board Montoya's car.
Yes, and it also looks like the Williams BMW team are slightly revising their philosophy regarding the Sunday morning warm-up. We have seen in the past that they've been conservative in the number of laps they do, that Montoya in particular has only gone out at the very end of a session. And it may well be, now this is a big maybe, but could they be just using up the remaining engine life in those engines they used in qualifying and then taking a risk and putting in fresh engines? Now, that is a big risk. I'm not sure they would be prepared to do it, but it is something to think about as Juan Pablo gets it all wrong, locked it up coming into the third chicane and struggles to regain grip as Ralf Schumacher now, as you go live, comes up and goes past Alex Young.
Ralph actually running the spare at the moment. He has access to the spare car. It is set up for him initially. So despite the fact that he's starting behind Montoya on the grid. But engine reliability, as we mentioned, will be crucial here. It is very tough on the motors with these long straights, flat out for long areas around this track. And so all the engine manufacturers will be a little nervous going into this race, looking for that reliability. And that was fairly obvious from Niki Lauda's comments this morning, as they have their best starting position for Jaguar ever, with 5th place now on the grid, but reliability is the key. Interesting looking back over past Grand Prix here at Monza. They can go quite deep into the race before they make a single stop, if that's the choice. As I say, last year Ferrari went for 2 stops. Barrichello here had the lead initially in the early stages of last year's Grand Prix, opened up a 9.5 second lead by lap 19 when he made his first stop, but they actually had a problem with the fuel rig, and that was part of the reason that he ended up losing out to Montoya last year. So Ferrari, I wonder if they'll go for a slight change in tactics this time.
I suspect they'll do pretty much what everybody else is going to do. Barrichello just pulls over to the right hand side of the track, and of course you saw the pit lane exit line, the line that will divide the exit of the pit lane all the way down to that first chicane. So important that drivers, when they come out after their one and only stop of the afternoon, stay to the right of the racing line and don't blend into it before that line comes to an end, which is almost, I would say, at the beginning of the braking zone into the first chicane.
Giancarlo Fisichella has access to the spare car, so he's switching from race car to spare car and back again. Home race for Fisichella. The Italians not going particularly well in qualifying yesterday, of course. They've ended up, Trulli and Fisichella have ended up together on the grid virtually, 11th and 12th from qualifying. And at the moment, well, they're still not really setting representative times. We've still got Ralf Schumacher fastest, and there again he goes quicker once more.
And a big chunk of time. He picked up 0.8 of a second, and that's his 3rd consecutive. We have seen certainly flying lap on this run and this set of tyres as Montoya's back in the pits. And now Kimi Räikkönen goes out and begins another run. This is coming up to the end of another lap. Räikkönen currently only 18th, but that's been because he's been in and out. Kimi just slots in immediately, 2nd quickest in a 26.419, and clearly the effects of yesterday are not there. Right on the very edge of the line, almost kissing the grass as he brakes, coming into that first chicane. As we go back to Rubens Barrichello.
Yeah, and he gets very close to Ralf Schumacher's time. Look at that, just 17 thousandths of a second slower. So Ferrari versus Williams, the battle rejoined. We had it in qualifying yesterday. Williams BMW came out on top of that particular battle. What's going to happen this afternoon when they are into the 53-lap race? Michael Schumacher moving over to the right-hand side, just perhaps cleaning up the grid a little bit. Coming up behind Felipe Massa. Massa currently 8th fastest.
Yes, we saw Rubens Barrichello doing the same thing that Michael is, and that's driving down what would not normally be considered the racing line, but of course they're trying to clear up any residue of dust, rubber, whatever may be in the track. But there is a Porsche Super Cup race to follow this morning warm-up, so no doubt there will be a lot more rubber, and that will be a slightly different rubber to the Formula 1 Michelin. Of course, the Porsche Super Cup rubber is Michelin, but of a different compound construction and whatever.
So Irvine across the line, he goes 8th fastest for the moment. And what they'll be doing now is trying to look at the setup of the car in terms of top speed. They might well back off a little bit of wing to reduce the amount of drag that the cars produce, and therefore be quick on the straight, because if you can be quick along this straight particularly, you do have an opportunity to outbrake somebody into the chicane. Interestingly, Alan McNish is fastest at the speed trap at the moment, 357 kilometers per hour. We actually saw the 360 mark being hit yesterday, 225 miles an hour.
Well, Takuma manages to get into the sand once again, the gravel. So it's been a tough weekend so far for the young Japanese driver. That accident yesterday was a scary one. The one we've just witnessed there in replay, well, that was a self-induced one.
So just over 15 minutes left in this morning warm-up session. Beautiful conditions at Monza as we prepare for the Italian Grand Prix. Ralf Schumacher currently fastest. He's put in another quicker lap there, 24.480 now, nearly half a second faster than Barrichello. Michael Schumacher, Raikkonen, Coulthard, and then Salo, Jona Trulli, Heidfeld, Irvine, Olivier Panis. Panis yesterday didn't qualify particularly well. Interestingly, the Honda teams had access to a sort of evolution version of the engine, but only one per team. Now Villeneuve got the better engine for BAR Honda, and Fisichella got the better engine for Jordan Honda. Perhaps that explains part of the reason that Jacques Villeneuve ended up 9th on the grid, which matches his best of the season. Meanwhile, Olivier Panis could only manage 16th on the grid.
Ben, just at the bottom end of the field, we're saying Jenson Button and Pedro de la Rosa both appear to have some kind of problem. They've done that one out installation lab back in the pits, and they've not returned to the track. And with just under the 15 minutes remaining, not a good portent for the start of the Grand Prix. They will want to get those cars out. Clearly it is a problem. We don't know what those problems are, but let's hope that they get them resolved shortly and get at least a couple of flying laps in, just to get a feel for the track and just start off in a positive frame of mind for the Grand Prix.
Well, it certainly looks as though they're making full use perhaps of spare engine mileage this morning, and Williams doing plenty of laps. Ralph is going quicker and quicker, well, in fact a little bit slower this time, but he's completed 9 laps already in this session, and that's more than anybody else, so this is definitely a change in strategy from Williams.
Yes, and maybe they're going to be a little bit more bullish as well. They feel that they've got a very good chance to win a Grand Prix. They haven't won a Grand Prix since Malaysia, second Grand Prix of the year when Ralf Schumacher took that victory. But that might have been a different race also, but had it not been for the collision with Michael and Juan Pablo in that turn one, a controversial one. Michael was penalised. Juan Pablo believed that he was stuck in the side by Michael, so could have been another victory for Ferrari, but Williams did take it.
Well, we'll see what happens once again. Of course, Michael and Montoya will be together on the front row of the grid. It could be pretty exciting coming down to this chicane at the start of the Grand Prix. Meanwhile, there is Mika Salo. Salo currently 7th fastest, and showing that what he said about the car being quick in race conditions could well be true. He's putting in some fairly decent times here this morning, running on the Michelin tyre, of course. And certainly if you look at the grid, there's no doubt that the Michelins were very strong in qualifying yesterday, with the likes of the Jaguars and Toyotas going well.
So Eddie Irvine running behind Fisichella coming into Lesmo 1, and let's watch, see whether there's any strength or disadvantage to the Jaguar behind the Jordan. Clearly in qualifying, Jaguar had the upper hand. Race setup may be a little bit more equal.
Rev limit's likely to be dropped a little bit, of course, for the race itself, and in order to protect the engines. Trying to listen in just a little bit there to Irvine. Just a quick note, by the way, there was a Formula 3000 race, of course. The final Formula 3000 race of the season was held here yesterday. Thomas Enger, who actually made his Grand Prix debut last year. Looks like Eddie's coming into the pit.
So just curious to see how he did catch up to Fisichella, and he caught up marginally, but then by that second split time he decided to come in. So he's coming back in. Pedro de la Rosa already waiting to go back out. Interestingly, the speed we're seeing in a straight line is that Jaguar are not in the top 5 or 6, which they would like to certainly be if they want to maintain that third row starting position, and quite a long way off to boot here. Watching Toyota come into the pits, Mika Salo and Alan McNish, very quick indeed. Right now Barrichello and Ralf Schumacher are quickest in all but one of those sectors.
So just to come back to that 3000, Thomas Enger is champion of Formula 3000. He finished in 3rd place in the race here yesterday afternoon, but that is subject to an FIA inquiry into a positive test on a doping test after Hungary.
Well, otherwise he would certainly be in cloud 9.
Absolutely, John. Well, Enger was 3rd. The race was won by his teammate Bjorn Werdheim, and Antonio Pizzonio, test driver for Williams, actually finished in 2nd place. There was a big accident. Ricardo Maurizio hitting the back of Rob Noroin into the first chicane and getting into a big spin, and then rolled the car into the first chicane. So action yesterday in the 3000s. Enger champion for the moment, but that might change as a result of the inquiry. Let's get back to what's happening here.
Well, Jacques Villeneuve only 17th up until now, and he goes up to 15th. And in the meantime, we saw Eddie Irvine come into the pits. Well, he came in and jumped out of one car, now into the other. And Irvine, 4th quickest, as Felipe Massa hops out of his car, and as he into this very smoky run the brakes. Yes, he's probably going to go and jump into the spare car.
Yes, he does have, the spare car is set up for him apparently.
But his own car, he must have gone pretty hot, because those brakes are very, very steamy indeed. So the young Brazilian, not certain about what his future is going to be. He is being penciled into the second Toyota seat, but then I think there's a number of drivers who would like to be in that situation. Not certain, nothing known, but very good performances by and large over the weekend from the young Brazilian. He was strong in the morning sessions, but unfortunately dropped back into the two. Look at that, the two Saubers 14th and 15th at the end of qualifying.
Yes, there's certainly plenty of smoke coming off. They may have to change a few bits and pieces on that car, and Massa now will come out in the other car just to see how that one feels. Barrichello heading down towards the first chicane, and currently second fastest in the Ferrari. Michael Schumacher still third, and then Eddie Irvine fourth fastest, just come back out onto the circuit as well. Just listen to the Ferrari working hard. They had their own special engines for qualifying. They're back to their race specification engines now.
And there's the electronics in that Ferrari gearbox, that just those snappy, clean, slur-free gear changes that are just amazing. The speed of the gear change, and the man responsible for that, John Sutton, has now moved over to McLaren and will be responsible for all the transmission design and whatever the philosophy that will go into next year's McLaren gearbox. Will certainly give them some performance advantage, I would believe.
Here that traction control working just a little bit in the middle of the Ascari chicane. Now it's back up to full song, looking at the rev counter up to the 18,000 mark. A little bit of an initial tentative application of the throttle, lifts off and then back on it again, and Michael's got a problem with something in his eye.
Yes, I think he's got a lash in his eye. We've seen a couple of occasions this year where he's been problemed by an eyelash, just sometimes gets caught and turns inward, and that's all resolved. Interestingly, Juan Pablo Montoya has only done, he's just gone out, in fact he's just on a lap, but he's down in 16th place, just ahead of Sato, Young, De La Rosa, who's now also out on a flying lap, and Button, who's only done 2 laps.
Yeah, it does look as though Montoya, they are protecting the engine on his car, and perhaps even those other guys at the back, perhaps that's the only reason they haven't done many laps, is they are looking after the engines, knowing how critical, how difficult this race is on the motors. So David Coulthard sits and waits at the moment. He's 6th fastest as Barrichello continues on around. He will be coming around to complete 11 laps. So remember, Barrichello having access to the spare car, so he's splitting the number of laps between 2 cars, so it's not as if, oh, he's gone a little bit wide there.
Oh, he has indeed, and he was a 10th of a second up, and that's up at the second chicane, and an error from Rubens, an uncharacteristic one of that. Ben, just looking down the list of runners, I mean, very few have done more than 6 laps, and you can count many of those as being in and out laps, so it may well be there's a lot of protection of engines, people keeping down the mileage on their engines to ensure that in this 190-mile Grand Prix, 53 laps around this 3.6-mile circuit, that the engines remain as fresh as possible. And Barrichello had just set at this point the fastest sector time in Sector 2, and then just out round the corner and then runs across the gravel, gets a bit of grass, does a bit of grass cutting. He'll probably have to come straight back in. Here's the onboard view. Well, look at that, just locks it up. And just wondering what Rubens was thinking at the time. Well, this man, Pedro de la Rosa, finally out on track. Interestingly, judging Irvine's speeds in the straight, they're about 6k down. Jaguar 6k down, and McLaren, who will be their principal competitors this afternoon, that's not something that they can afford to throw away.
No, that's right. So it would indicate perhaps Jaguars are running a little bit more downforce and drag, because Eddie's been saying how strong the engine is this weekend, particularly. Villeneuve has moved up to 6th place. Remember, Jacques Villeneuve starting 9th. He is the best of the rest of the Bridgestone runners. Apart from the 2 Ferraris on the front 2 rows of the grid, Jacques Villeneuve starting 9th is the next best Bridgestone user.
Of course, that engine that Honda have made available, I don't believe it's going to be a race engine. That was purely just for qualifying, so he'll be back to the regular engine, the engine that they used in Belgium, and hopefully they will not have any of the problems that they had in Belgium. I think more Belgium a function of the racetrack rather than a fundamental engine fault.
Jenson Button's moved up the order, having done a couple of laps now, having been allowed out. Montoya is going to improve a fair bit here as well. Let's just see what time he does. He's down in 18th at the moment because he's only completed a few flying laps. He's coming up across the line, so this brings him up to second. We have the two Williams first and second as Barrichello and Michael Schumacher push down to third and fourth. Irvine, Raikkonen, Villeneuve, Coulthard, Fisichella and Mika Salo, the top 10 so far.
And we're riding into the low cloud just hanging over the circuit, coming into Parabolica. The sun's still pretty much low in the sky. There's Giancarlo Fisichella, accelerates right and accelerates into the pit lane.
Yes, makes his way down.
Now here's the line. Oh, we just lost it. We're just going to show you the line where you have to be down to, for the race, 80 k's per hour.
There's a hesitation on the echo mode, but when I go flat, when I go fast, there's no problem.
So De La Rosa just talking about the engine response on the Jag. A little bit of a slow car moving ahead.
Yes, Alex Young just on the exit of Lesmo 2. Maybe, well, of course, look at that, the difference in straight line speed. Takes Montoya 3/4 of that straight to get ahead just under braking, and he's 0.07 of a second faster than Ralf Schumacher. Probably lost a little bit of time on the exit of Lesmo 2 due to the proximity to Alex Young. Now he can pick up the speed. There's nobody ahead of him of any consequence other than Kimi Raikkonen, and he's well through Parabolica by the time Montoya gets there.
Fantastic view looking down at that last corner once again, and right out to the white line. We saw Michael Schumacher just millimetres off the grass in that final qualifying run. He goes a bit faster again, stays second to his teammate, and Jacques Villeneuve pushing his car back up pit lane.
Well, a little problem, maybe again a launch control start. We know that BAR had some problems with the clutch mechanism on Olivier Panis's car, and I wonder, is this a similar problem for Jacques Villeneuve? It's an area where they've struggled from time to time throughout the year, and that's in the zone where you would start or practice your launch control.
Remember, the marshals, if the marshals help him here, then it means that he can't go back out in that car in this session, so he's got to try and get back behind the line so that the mechanics can help him. So a little bit of a morning workout here for the Canadian, who, as we say, has qualified well and matches his best qualifying performance of the season so far. Another opportunity perhaps to get the BAR Honda into the points. He finally gets it over the line.
Yes, Robert Barrichello just a moment ago, he went second quickest, so Ferrari are now splitting the two Williams drivers. And let's watch what happened. Maybe another little lock-up into one of the chicanes, or maybe not.
Alan McNish using that extra runoff there. Not too bad over the speed bumps. They talked about those earlier in the weekend. Everyone seems to be reasonably satisfied with them. I'm sure that we'll see people bouncing over them in the race itself. Now, Michael Schumacher, we've just got under 3 minutes to go in the morning warm-up session. He's currently 5th fastest, but an improvement coming up perhaps here. Good first sector from him. His brother just a little way ahead.
Yes, Irvine and Ralf Schumacher just coming out of Parabolica as Michael comes into it. And we're looking to see if anything particularly... Well, Michael had a personal best in first sector, nothing outstanding by his standards in the second sector, but maybe enough to see him get ahead of Felipe Massa. And as indeed it does, so Massa and Michael Schumacher swap positions as Michael goes forth.
And there is Felipe Massa. He's not able to come back at Michael on that particular lap, a 27.031 compared to a 25.4. This is his teammate Nick Heidfeld. Of course, Massa actually out-qualifying Heidfeld on this occasion by about half of a tenth of a second. Very close, that group down there in the sort of after the top 10. But Massa doing another fine job indeed in qualifying. Good experience of this track. He was the Euro Formula 3000 champion last year, and they raced here at Monza during the course of the season.
Interesting to watch what Toyota are doing, because Saulo is in 6th place, McNish in 11th, but the speeds of McNish on the fastest parts of the track are about 4 to 5 k's quicker than Saulo, who's actually quicker overall in a lap. So Toyota clearly are splitting their workload between a little bit of downforce for lap time and a little bit of reduced downforce for straight line speeds. Now the downforce reflects in the lap time. Saulo is the quicker of the two. Come the race, it's a different scenario, and you need to have that top speed, and McNish right now is fastest in all 4 sectors. So information teams will all take on board, but certainly valuable for Toyota.
Yeah, maximum speed for McNish, about 223 miles an hour, heading down to chicane number 1. As Michael Schumacher comes across the line again. No real change either in pace or in position, so he stays 4th fastest in this morning's warm-up. As Villeneuve is ready to come back out again, is he? David Richards looking a little concerned at the pictures.
So let's see if we can get that launch control mechanism to work. Yeah, you can hear it. Yep, looks okay this time. And of course that'll be a lap where he'll come past. Oh, right on the exit of Kimi Räikkönen, really pushing the envelope as he comes out of Lesmo 2. And Räikkönen currently running in 7th place. That was a fastest first sector time for him. Now a fastest second sector time for the Finn. So if he can continue, he may well also find himself ahead of Olivier Panis, who's now leaped up to 5th place, ahead of Felipe Massa in 6th.
Finished in 7th place here last year, Räikkönen, when he was driving for Sauber, so he was just outside the points. That was a fast race last year, and as you may recall, we're looking at a potential fastest ever race in Formula 1 history here this afternoon. It will depend, of course, on the safety car not being out there, and last year it was a clean race, and they averaged 148 miles an hour for the entire race distance. The record 150.75 miles an hour from Peter Geppin, and that race target perhaps under attack again here today.
So Irvine and Michael Schumacher, just look at that, the Ferrari just pulls out alongside the Jaguar in a straight line. And well, if you ever needed to see where horsepower is, certainly Ferrari, the prancing horse, can out horsepower the Jaguar, the feline, a cat. So 324 k's in fact was Michael's speed against 312 for Irvine as they went across the line. That is an absolutely mountain of speed to try and overcome. So Jaguar will no doubt look at their data and analyse what they need to do, because if they're going to start in the 3rd row of the grid with Irvine, 4th row of the grid with De La Rosa, and want to stay in contact with these two cars, Kimi Räikkönen and David Coulthard, they need to have good top speed.
Mika Salo just pulled over a moment ago. He's out of the car being pushed. He was just by the pits actually, so I don't know whether, presumably he had some sort of technical problem, and so Salo's session ends, and there might be some concerns there for Toyota. Räikkönen coming around, finding himself of course pushed back on the grid, but working hard to come up with a decent race setup. He's 5th fastest, comes back in, and that's how he'll finish the session. And I think most people now heading back into the pits. All cars have taken the checkered flag. Ralf Schumacher ends the warm-up with the fastest time. Barrichello 2nd fastest in the Ferrari. Montoya 3rd, and then Michael Schumacher, Kimi Räikkönen and Olivier Panis with a good time at the end. Look how hot the brakes are
Räikkönen,
there.
yeah, I mean, he came into the pits up to the pit line, where the point we have got to get down to the speed limit, and he really hammered those brakes. He came in very hard as well. So brakes, again, an area at Monza. I've heard Irvine complain all weekend about a lack of feel in the brake pedal, not happy with it. Well, by the time you get through your long Grand Prix here, the brake pedal will be long, and watch for lots of carbon dust come out of those brakes, under braking, particularly into that first chicane. And you've got to be careful bringing the car, once it's in the pits, rotate the wheels, make sure you keep the discs spinning, otherwise you can get a hot spot. So they'll put fans over the wheels just to make sure that there's cool air blowing through. There it is, Williams guys just stick it on. I mean, they're aware of the problem. They don't want any aeration to get into that system, so keep those things as quick, get them down in temperature as quickly as possible.
So Michael can have a look through the times. He sees himself 4th fastest this morning, but I shouldn't think that'd be too much concern. Look at the that's a temperature gauge. That's what's happening there. There's the fan that we were talking about as well. So a quick temperature reading from the brake guys. They can assess that. Very important to get an idea on the brake temperatures with a full tank of fuel on board, because those brakes will take quite a pounding during the 53-lap race here this afternoon. De La Rosa is pushed back in, only 20th fastest in this morning's warm-up. Last of all, he completed just 6 laps, so slower than Alex Young. Let's just quickly run through the times from this morning then. The two BMW-powered Williams separated there by Rubens Barrichello in the Ferrari. It certainly looks once again as though it's a Ferrari versus Williams battle here at Monza for the Italian Grand Prix. But Räikkönen a little closer in terms of pace in the McLaren Mercedes. Look at that, only 0.2 of a second slower than Michael Schumacher. Panis going well at the end of the session. Felipe Massa as well, so the Bridgestone runners showing it a little more strongly in the warm-up than they did in qualifying. Then it's Coulthard, Mika Salo, whose car stopped at the end of the session, behind him Nick Heidfeld, and then it's Irvine, Alan McNish, Takuma Sato, 13th fastest in the Jordan, then Jacques Villeneuve ahead of Giancarlo Fisichella in the battle of the Honda power teams. Jarno Trulli and Jenson Button pretty evenly matched once again in the Renaults. Mark Webber some way ahead of his teammate Alex Young, and Pedro de la Rosa only 6 laps completed and ended up slowest of all. But remember, he will be starting in 8th place on the grid. Both Jaguars starting in the top 8 for this afternoon's Italian Grand Prix. Now, as the peace descends once again over the Monza track, we have an opportunity to say good morning, hello, welcome to Gerhard Berger. Gerhard, thank you for joining us this morning, to have your company. You must be delighted with the performance yesterday. Tell us a little bit about the engines. We gathered that you broke a new rev limit in qualifying yesterday.
Good morning. Yes, we had a new specification of engine here, and yesterday was the first time that we went through the wall of 19,000 revs, and that was a great thing. We have to congratulate our engineers. We did really a great job, and I think our engine shows yesterday an extreme good performance.
Well, we can hear it in the background there as it's just checked out, and that's good, just a short check for us. Now, presumably, it's all about revs in Formula 1 engine development at the moment. Just how high can we go? How long is it before we're going to see that 20,000 rev mark beaten, do you think?
No limits in BMW.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. Of course, looking forward to a great day. John, I know you wanted to talk to Gerhard.
Good morning, Gerhard. I hope you're well.
Morning, John. Yes, thank you.
Gerhard, we have read in the past that you haven't concluded a deal to remain with BMW in the future. What's that situation at the minute?
Well, that's very simple. I mean, there's nothing to discuss in the moment. I still have a contract what's going into the 2003, and in this winter, of course, I have to think if I want to spend another period of my life in Formula 1. I mean, Formula 1 or racing is, of course, very, very important for me, but on the other side, there's not much time left for anything others. So it has to have a good thought this winter, but nothing what is to be discussed in the moment. I think it's too early.
And what is your instinct at the minute, though?
Instinct in the minute is that we would like to win this race this afternoon and to be second in the World Championship this year. That's what counts in the moment.
Okay, which of your two drivers do you want to win, or you're happy either?
I'm happy either. I mean, it doesn't matter. From the side of BMW, we would like to see a 1-2, and whoever wins the race, we are very, very happy. I mean, Juan did a great job again yesterday to put the car on ball. He's really very strong. I think he's going to be very strong also this afternoon. But Ralph should have a similar chance.
And just finally, Gerhard, looking at the tyre situation, does look as though Michelin not only coming up with a tyre that was quick in qualifying yesterday, but seems to be consistent in race conditions. Is it fair to make that assumption?
Absolutely. We did yesterday some long runs, and the cars or the lap times was consistent, and I think they're going to help us a lot today in the race.
Great. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're looking forward to an exciting Italian Grand Prix, and hope it goes well for you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So, morning warm-up over, and hopefully get a chance to hear that interview in just a moment with Ron Dennis as well. Good start for Williams today, but Ferrari will be strong as ever, as we can expect to see, particularly here at Monza. Let's look back now over the highlights from this morning's warm-up.